evening.
Hello, attention. We're going to get started.
It is 6 o'clock and we have a pretty full, tight schedule. We're trying to fit a lot into an hour and a half, so we are going to get going. My name is Karen Seaman and I'm the editor of the Cambridge News, and I'll be moderating the forum tonight, and we're going to start off with 4 candidates for village board and then take a little break where you can go have a cup of coffee or something from Kind Folk. Chris is going to be open all evening, and just chat with the village board candidates and the village president candidates who are also here. And then we'll pick up again at 7 o'clock to have a half an hour forum with the village president candidates. And I will just let you know, just for full disclosure, that I did give the questions to the candidates ahead of time, which isn't always done in the candidates forum, but I thought that we were so tight on time that I wanted to give them a chance to really think about their answers and to be able to say what they wanted to say in a short period of time. So that's how this is working tonight. So we are going to get started, and I'm going to give them each 1 minute to introduce themselves. These are the candidates for village board, and then we'll get into questions. And there will be a session, a few minutes at the end of my questions where you can ask them questions yourself as part of the forum. So we're just going to start right away with Chris, and
all right.
You have 1 minute to introduce yourself and say why you're running for village board.
All right, welcome. Hello, my name's Chris Brunig, and I'm a husband of 18 years to my wife Nadine, and a father of 2 young children, and they both go to school here in Cambridge. I've been a resident of Cambridge since I retired from active duty, the United States Navy, in 2014. And why do I want to be on the board? I want to be on the board because I want to continue to serve. I want to help make Cambridge a great place to live, just like everyone else out there. And after serving on active duty, I had this urge to return back to service. And I enjoy being involved when it comes to helping with the community.
Okay. My name is Ted Cumbier. I just retired after 26 years as a construction coordinator with Newman Pools. Because of my experience in the water park industry, I was asked to be a citizen rep on the Village Water Commission. That led to my joining the village board in 2013. I currently serve on the Water Committee, Police Committee, Personnel Committee, and I chair the Public Works Committee. I'm also a Cambridge rep on the Cambridge-Oakland Wastewater Commission. I was an early supporter of the Village Library Project. I'm a 27-year veteran of the U.S. Army, and I've lived in the village since 2005. I'm married to Cambridge native Mary Jeremo. I'd like to serve another term to help clean up unfinished projects in the village and to ensure proper oversight of future projects.
Hi, I'm Steve Struss. I'm the current village president here in Cambridge. Lived in this community for 25 years now and raised our 3 kids here. They're all grown and out of the community, but a couple of them are even talking maybe coming back to Cambridge someday, which surprised me. I love this community. I've been here, like I said, 25 years, and the reason I've served on the board for many years and as president is just to try to make it a better place. Married to Lori, and she's chair of the Arts Council, and she has the same goals as the Arts Council chair, just trying to make a better community. The reason I'm running, stepping down from village president, but still running this board, is to take 1 term, and who knows, maybe more if I get elected, to help the transition. So whoever wins the election as president, I hope to help them kind of ease into the position, give them whatever support I can as they learn the ropes.
Okay, Kathy Cunningham. I've been on the board for 10 years now. I've lived here since 1967. Been married to Bob for almost 42 years. My family story with Cambridge is we used to live in a suburb of South Chicago. My parents were both school teachers. They decided one time that they'd had enough there, took a drive north, drove into Cambridge and said, this is it. This is where we want to raise our family. They both went to the school system, got jobs that day. Jim Knobloch gave them both jobs in the school system. And that's how I feel about our community. This is my village. This is where my heart is. And I have grandkids now in school here, and some of my nieces and nephews are all teachers, and my daughter-in-law is the school counselor at the elementary school. So this is my village, and this is why I'm here.
We're going to start with questions now, and I should let you know, just so everybody understands what's happening with the election. We have 4 candidates here for village board, and as you're listening to their answers, just know that 3 of them can be elected. So the 3 candidates who get the most votes on the ballot in April will be elected to the village board. So just keep that in mind as you're listening to what they're saying. So the first question has to do with fire and EMS here in Cambridge. And here it goes. The Cambridge Fire and EMS Commission has made some important and costly recommendations this year regarding staffing and vehicle purchases, and more such decisions are ahead, including the proposed expansion of the fire and EMS station. The village is responsible for a significant portion of that cost. How should the village proceed with planning for and funding emergency services? And we're going to start with Chris.
All right. Well, since I've been on the board, it's been a little less than a year. I've been on, had the pleasure of being on audit and finance. So I'm a numbers guy, and since I've been on the board, our yearly contribution to fire and EMS, the commission, has went from around $78,000 to $144,000. That's a $66,000 a year jump since I've been on the board. Then we paid an additional $58,000 plus for a new fire truck, and then we are adding an additional $16,000 pushed our way because there wasn't enough donations. So I get that, I understand, but that's another part of the number piece here. Then we paid $70,000 plus interest to the commission for our portion of the Pizza Pit property. Now that's just the property. That doesn't take into consideration the renovation of the fire building, fire and EMS building. We have to build within 5 years per that contract, so we have to figure out what we're going to do. So with that comes along another fire truck we're going to have to pay for. I know it sounds like gloom and doom, but it's numbers. Another 2 EMT vehicles. Plus we have to pay for the building renovation as well. So I'm going to go ahead and take a note off of Governor Evers and say everything's on the table, right? So when you look at this financial picture, it sounds pretty bleak, especially for the taxpayers, especially for you and I. So when I say everything's on the table, we have to take a really hard look at where we're at with the full-time EMT staff. We have to take a look at is there any way possible we can bring the volunteers back into the fold for the firefighting and for EMT. Maybe there's a possibility of augmenting what we do have, or
Are you trying to cut them off?
yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Okay.
And then there's one more thing, just maybe there's an opportunity there to combine with Deerfield as well.
Okay. In regard to planning, we have an outstanding fire department and EMS that should remain in local control. With planning, the commission needs to listen to the fire chief and EMS director to plan for upcoming needs. The village rep on the commission needs to keep the rest of the village board fully informed so that there are no surprises. Vehicle purchases need to be put on a schedule and adhered to and not pushed down the road. In regards to funding, we need to clarify that all employees are paid, including the ones we call volunteers. We need to accept the reality that it is costly to keep these services going 24/7, and we have to budget properly. If we don't, we don't want to be out of service or have slow response times. Grants need to be fully explored. We cannot support the efforts to recruit. We need to support the efforts to recruit and train new employees and support the Friends of the EMS. Once architectural plans are ready for the proposed addition, we'll have to look at a timetable that is realistic
Karen, you're going to have to say something.
I'm gonna have to say something.
Yeah.
Yeah,
and discuss the bonding and referendum.
Maybe you
I'm
need a
done.
little bell or something.
I should have had a bell. I will
Yeah.
say something.
That's it.
Keep going.
I'm done.
All right.
Okay, I'm actually the village's rep on the fire commission, and I'm the secretary treasurer. So I've been keeping track of the costs and whatnot. So I'm well aware of the issues as far as the increase in costs that Kristen mentioned. And I'm afraid it's just reality. We'd like to use volunteers more, but meshing those volunteers with paid staff is a very difficult thing to do just with the way its schedules work out. So I've fought for a long time to try to keep volunteers at a maximum, but I've hit a lot of brick walls. So I think the reality is we're just going to have more paid staff. We're seeing it in other communities across the state, and I'm afraid it's happening here as well. The answer to it, I'm afraid, as I see it, is a referendum. We've looked at doing a referendum in the past, but we didn't have enough time to get it on the books. I think now we're going to look at one to get on the election this fall. There is some possibility that the current administration now in the state under Tony Evers might free up the levy limit, but I'm afraid there's some proposals to do that, and that would really help. Especially, and there's one provision that'd be just for emergency services. However, I'm afraid with the legislature at opposition, he might not get far with that.
10 seconds left.
Pardon?
10 seconds left.
10 seconds.
10 seconds.
So, I'm afraid the only answer short of being able to change the levy limit is to float a referendum.
All right, well, I was pretty much going to say exactly what Steve did. We do need a referendum because if everyone got one of these in their tax bill this year. And if you look at it, this is what the fire, the safety part is last year, and the top part is what it is this year. It's taken up a whole lot more of our budget. And it's taken money out of everything else. And so we have to figure out some way to fund all these things. And I just have a feeling like looking at the numbers of referendum is really the way we're going to have to go. Because we can't afford, our levy limits have not been able to be increased by more than, it hasn't even increased cost of living. So all of our expenses are going up, but our levy limits aren't. And you hate to say that to people who feel like, they're overtaxed now, but we are also taxpayers here. And we are also the ones who are trying to figure out every day how this is going to work.
Question number 2 has to do with development and infrastructure. In the past year, the village has been approached by developers wanting to build new neighborhoods and expand existing ones, and by a developer wanting to build a sizable gateway business and residential project with tip assistance on U.S. Highway 12 and 18. Much of the former Melster Candy site near downtown remains undeveloped, and questions have arisen about cleanup there. The receipt of a Dane County grant to extend a bike path toward the Glacial Drumlin State Trail will require a large local match, and some significant public works projects lie ahead, notably the reconstruction of Blue Jay Way. What are the most important things the village needs to consider when planning for development and major public projects? And how would you prioritize and plan for funding development and infrastructure projects?
All right, and we're off. First priority for me is to...
Your name, please?
Excuse me?
Your name?
Chris Brunig.
That was earlier, we went through
I
introductions.
know, but some of us came in after you did that.
No problem. Chris Brunig. My first priority is to comply with the DNR and get the Melsters property cleaned up to a point where we can develop it, develop the land. We have to take into consideration the floodplain and everything else that came out. But secondly, I'd like to create, or like to work with the board to create or improve upon a capital plan on infrastructure, namely roads. We get government transportation aid to the extent of $88,000 plus last year, and I would say that that needs to stay with roads in Cambridge and not on to augment other public safety. And thirdly, we have a census coming up in 2020, and with that being said, there's going to be a need for an updated strategic plan for Cambridge, and that plan has to go for development with the village, with a strong focus, a plan development for the village with a strong focus on pro-village development agreements. So these developers that come in, we have to focus on those new developments being pro-village development agreements. And then lastly, a saved round, a village remodel with an emphasis on safety for our personnel that work in the village office.
My name is Ted Cumbier. The board needs to consider health and safety as top priorities. Some projects that can be put off until we have the money, others can't, and we have to find the money somehow. An example, we didn't have any money at the time, was the mold eradication on the Amundsen Center a couple of years ago. A big concern of mine is well number 2 and 3 need to be treated for bacteria that is attacking the well casing joints. While the water is safe, if we don't spend the money to do the treatment in the next 2 years, we'll have to again to replace well casing at a much higher cost. It's a false economy to kick the can down the road, and we've known about this, and now we've got to do something about it. The second point is the Melster property cleanup, but by delaying action, we are now being forced by the DNR to do the cleanup. We must move ahead so that the rest of the property can be developed. We need to be working with At Home Again on phases 2 and 3 of the original proposal.
10 seconds.
Moving forward, we need to properly vet our contractors, make sure contracts are properly written and have proper oversight. Development contracts need payment and performance bonds to make sure that the work gets done on a timely basis per the contract.
I'm Steve Struss. The way I look at these individual things is that they're apples and oranges. You can't say this project is more important than that project. They're all things that we have to address, and we just have to find ways to take them one at a time. For instance, the development with potential TIF on the entrance to the village. It's really not a financial issue because it's a pay-go TIF, so there's no impact to the village other than a financial impact, other than some administrative costs on our end. So that you really can't compare to something else like the Melster cleanup, because that will be a significant cost. There, I feel like the DNR is now involved there, so we're going to have to comply with the law, and that's our intent. When we did the cleanup originally, we met the law at the time, and so there's no hazardous materials there, for instance. So whatever cleanup they're now requiring of us, we'll have to figure out what the minimum we have to do and get it done. We're kind of disappointed about the situation on Blue Jay Way, that we're in an agreement with Town of Oakland where we're maintaining it, and the goal was that would become a village road. In our latest meeting with them, they are now backing off of that, saying that no, it will not be a village road. And so now that whole agreement may fall apart, and then therefore that road will go back to Town of Oakland maintenance. This issue came up because we were looking to rebuild that road for the high school, and that'd be a high cost to the village, of course, and we'd have to special assess, and you can't do that in the Town of Oakland. So it got very complex. So my point is that we have to take each issue separately, make the best decision we can, and you can't say we're not going to do this because we're doing this. We have to do the best we can on each one.
All right, Kathy Cunningham. As if to all the points that Steve made, I agree with a lot of them. The Melster candy, we have to do it now because the DNR is involved. We thought we had it done all right. We don't. we can't, nobody messes with the DNR, okay? And the bike path, that's a very special thing. If we could get that done, I think that would be fabulous. And anybody that has deep pockets, or even a small amount, we will be taking all sorts of donations for that. But that's a great thing to add to our community, because we have all the natural resources here. And it's a great draw to people to come into town and have all these things to do. Blue Jay Way, I am for giving it back to Oakland, because they said our costs were like $450,000 to rebuild it the way we want it built and the school would like it built. They say to their town standards, it's going to cost them $65,000. Let them do it. It's their road. We're not getting that much money in state aids from road aids from them. And the developments, we were talking to one developer who wanted to develop housing out in Summer Prairie. I think that's something we really need to talk about. The Summer Prairie people are a little upset with it, but what we've been told is that millennials don't want big yards. That whole development has small yards, nice houses, and that's what everything that we've been told is happening.
10 seconds.
Okay. Anyway, so I think, like Steve, I said, each one of these things has to be done, and it's not, let's do this instead of. We have to figure out a way to make some of this work.
Question number 3 has to do with downtown. The downtown is the heart of a small historic community. In recent years, vacant storefronts have become an issue. At the same time, new businesses have sprung up, and existing businesses have expanded and succeeded. And some local events, particularly Midwest Fire Fest, have drawn visitors downtown. How should the village approach efforts to keep downtown vibrant? And in a historically arts-driven community, how do the arts fit into all of that?
All right, I believe we need to work with the building owners and possibly sit down with them, as well as our Chamber of Commerce, work with them. We just gave the Chamber $10,000 to work with the downtown, so allow that to flourish. Possibly go out through social media and through your paper and conduct a needs assessment. And that needs assessment is what are businesses, building owners, what are their plans? What are their end goals? And see how that meshes with our village end goals. Stay in contact with Small Business Development Center at UW-Madison and small business entrepreneurs out of MATC, or Madison College as they're known now. Row Pottery seems to be thriving. Firefest is growing in popularity. It seems every year that I've been here, the crowd seems larger and larger. So, but the reality is that the market is going to decide if the arts will grow in Cambridge, right? So it used to be if you build it, they will come. But now it's more like if you build it, you better be able to ship it. So I think that's where we're going with that.
Okay, downtown businesses. The last thing I propose is creating an economic development committee with representation from the downtown business owners. We need to support the efforts to make Cambridge a destination. We can support the arts events and festivals with promotion and permitting. The Pottery Festival and concerts in the park have been very successful. We should explore grants for a permanent band shell in the West Side Park. We also have a strong pioneer history in this area and can support the efforts of the Koshkonong Prairie Historical Society and our local museums. Heritage Day was very successful for 2 years. We need to take a look at ways to improve the back of the buildings on Springwater Alley, take action on the buildings in disrepair. We should encourage businesses to tie in with the Camrock Park, Parks and Bike Trail. Fourth thing, I'd like to see a senior council in the community to coordinate the senior meal site, cap activities for senior. If we offered programs, activities after the meal site lunches, we'd bring in more seniors into the downtown on weekdays. One thing we need to address in the future here is we need additional downtown parking, especially around the library and the village hall. It seems there's never any parking anymore. We need to support the community library in the material budget and programming efforts. We are overdue in erecting Welcome to Cambridge sign at the entrances to the village.
10 seconds.
As a member of the Personnel Committee, I have concerns about our inability to retain village administrators. Hiring and training has taken up revenues that could have gone to economic development. Moving forward, the village administrator could be utilized to help with contracts on the back end.
Well, this is a very frustrating issue for me as village president over the last 7 years. We have worked and worked and worked to try to get the downtown occupied. We've worked a lot of things that Chris has mentioned we have done. We've worked with Economic Development Corporation. We've had an economic development director, and she worked with the downtown businesses. Unfortunately, we have a couple of things working against us. One is some of the downtown business owners just refuse to reduce their rents to the point where it meets the market. So they sit empty. I don't know how they continue to do that and still pay their taxes, but that's, I guess, their business. The other thing is just retail is changing. I mean, it's even affecting State Street in Madison. A lot of longtime companies there are going under. As Chris mentioned, it's all going online. So what we need is things that are available, destination things that are not available online. And that's where the arts can fit in. But we have 35 artists in this area. However, they all work out of their own studios for the most part, or homes. And so for them to come into town and pay rent doesn't make sense. It's going to hurt their bottom line. So I don't have any easy answers. I've been working at this for over 7 years. One of my goals is, as stepping down as president, is it'll free up some of my time. I'm currently retired, so I'll have some time. And one of my goals is to work with what we can do downtown as far as grants, or just working with the business owners, talking to them, which I've done some of already, but I'll have more time to see if we can't come to some kind of agreement as far as, it's hurting the other businesses that are here trying to operate. There's not as much traffic because the other storefronts are empty. So we're going to keep working at it. I don't have any easy answers, but we just have to just keep plugging.
Okay, first of all, kudos to the Arts Council. They have done a wonderful job with the Fire Fest, with the pottery tours, both of them a year. They are fabulous. The Arts Council is bringing people into town. We have to figure out how to keep them down here. And part of the problem is what Steve said. We have a couple of owners in town who just will not rent or sell their buildings. We have tried and tried and tried to talk to these people. They really pretty much don't want us in their business. We used to have a really good economic development coordinator, Linda Korth. We got a lot of stuff done when we hired her, and she just concentrated on that. But unfortunately, the reality is all of this, we can't afford someone to do it all the time. She worked supposedly 20 hours a week. That's what we paid her for. I think it was more like 50 hours a week she worked. But if we could do that again, that would be fabulous. We're really hoping the chamber really comes through for us on this. I don't know what else to tell you. We have tried. If anybody knows these owners of these buildings, talk to them. Tell them, we need a vibrant downtown. You need to adjust your prices to what the market will bear or sell.
So it is 6:30, and we have about 10 minutes to have you in the audience ask questions of the village board candidates. And how I'd like to structure it is to give every candidate a chance to answer the same question. So I'd rather you not just pointedly ask one candidate, give them each a chance to respond. So I'll just take a show of hands. Well, actually, the best way to do it is actually if you could please stand up and say your name and ask your question. Okay.
I'm Mira Shapiro, and I'm one of the ones that are concerned about the Summer Ridge. And the question I have is I have had only one person from the board come out and look at the property and understand why we are concerned about the building back there and having smaller properties. No one has bothered, we've invited people, no one has showed up. So I guess before you decide to make this decision on how they should be building out there, I'd like you to come out there and look. I would like you to walk the property a little bit at least around the block and just see. We've got 3 retention ponds back there. You want to put houses back up there like he wants, you better look at that property before he does it. So
Let's give each candidate, say, maybe 1 minute to respond to that.
So my response is I accept your invite, and I would love to come out and take a look at the property, and I think that's the least that we can do on the board. I didn't know there was an open invite, but shame on me for not checking social media.
we're on board at that point
Okay.
when you started, so.
But yeah, I'll exchange information with you after this, and I'd love to come out and take a look at it.
Go ahead, Ted.
I haven't been invited, but I'm willing to come out and walk it. And we also have to take a look at what the developer is proposing out there and maybe make changes that'll maybe fit that area. But I think that the housing, the way it's set up right now, it's too many houses for that area, from what I've heard.
So at this point, it's a proposal. It's not cast in stone yet. So what we're working off of is plans. So walking the property, for me, really won't make any difference. I'm an engineer, retired engineer, so I can look at plans and see what the spacing is and whatnot. And I feel like the yards could be somewhat smaller and still be adequate. Like Kathy had said earlier, the trend now is to go to smaller lots, less maintenance, and even smaller homes. This developer has a development down in Stoughton, and it's the exact same homes, that square footages and lot size that he has down there, and that looks very adequate. I know, Kathy, you visited
Yep.
it. I plan on going there. I haven't been there yet. But yes, I could come out and take a look, but I think from what we see of the plans, what he has could be adequate. I'm not happy with the narrow streets. We're still working on with that for safety. But like I said, we're still working with it. This isn't cast in stone yet. And we're taking your comments into an account, believe me.
I know Kathy made a comment on that already, but the point is this was set up as a 3-phase, 3 stages. 2 stages are done, the 3rd stage should be made smaller streets, smaller houses. I'm not against smaller houses, but you know, what do you do to the people that are living there now?
Street size.
Well, but
let
that development is
Kathy.
done. That developer went
Yes.
belly under.
Let's let Kathy.
So now it's a new,
Okay. And I have walked it. I didn't know I was supposed to walk with you.
No one didn't said anything, no one,
Well,
no person said anything to us.
Let's let
Okay,
Kathy respond.
I really didn't realize that you had an invitation. I would have walked it with you, but I have been out there. And the Summer Prairie thing, that was never a finalized plat map.
I understand that.
Okay, so if it's not a finalized plat map, it doesn't go in with your subdivision.
But the people that live out there, that's why they're all upset.
And I understand
They pay
that.
X number of dollars for their houses, then they have something made smaller next to the lowers the,
And our taxes aren't cheap.
I don't
None of
know.
ours are.
I don't know if they
Let's
can make that
let
argument.
Kathy, yeah,
And-
let's
but-
let Kathy respond.
Yeah, but that development went bankrupt with your
I
covenants.
understand that.
And
And this guy's
so-
trying to come in and tell you what he wants to do.
And that's how
you should
he's,
be telling him what he's allowed to do.
Let's let Kathy
Let's
talk.
we have had one meeting with him, that's it. He came in, made his proposal, we all got to think about it and talk about it, and we talked about it in public, and that's how you all know about it, because we were in public. That is it. We have never had another conversation with this
And
man.
we're waiting for him.
So it's, you know, until he comes back, we have told him, you know, that people were upset about this. So until he comes back to us, and says, all right, I can do this and this and this. Have you guys been over to see the one in Stoughton? And
I've heard enough of these other projects.
Well,
So,
well, it's
you
kind
know,
of,
we
it's
have had
can I
people
finish?
check on it.
Okay.
Let's say just a few more seconds.
Okay,
just to-
so when you ask us to come and look at your places, and I did say in public with everyone that was there, if you guys can all go to Stoughton and look, and that's what I was hoping everybody would do. Go and look at his place. It's right off Page Street in Stoughton, and just so everybody's on the same page when we're talking about it. That would be fabulous.
He's got more than one
Let's-
place.
Let's move on to
Okay.
another question. Give another person a chance to ask a question. And you can talk further
Yeah.
in between or afterwards. Does anyone else have a
I'd like to
question?
ask about this Melster situation. Now, this years ago.
Can you stand up and tell us your name?
My name is Lon Shapiro. I've been here 43 years. Whatever happened to this Melster thing, somebody had dropped the ball on it. I don't understand how we could do what we did, and they say it's okay, and now we have to pay for it?
Okay.
Something's wrong.
Let's let everybody respond, and we'll give you each a minute more to respond. We did talk about this earlier, but I'll let you respond if you'd like to further respond.
I don't have much of the history with the Melster situation. I'm not trying to skirt the responsibility, but my intention, my motivation right now is to comply with what the DNR is asking and to clean it up. And unfortunately, that means that some things have to be put on hold, and because we need to comply with the DNR, and that, you know, that's the way things work. So that's my commitment to you as a trustee, that we'll take care. That's a #1 priority.
Okay. Let's move on to Ted.
I know quite a bit about the Melster property, and I watched the building come down, and at one point there was a huge pile of rubble there right in December, right before it froze up, and the next day it was totally gone. It was all shoved in a hole and covered up with 3 inches of fill, and that's it. I don't think that I had made, in the contract process, we wanted all the concrete could stay on site, but it had to be crushed.
You have about 10 seconds. 'Cause we
And that was not done. And so now we need to move forward, clean up the site, and let At Home Again build that project in phase 2 and phase 3.
Well, this is a very complex issue, and I can't do it in a minute, but I'll do the best I can. A demolition firm purchased that property, took out what they could as far as recovering material, and then hired a second contractor, sub, to do the demolition. It's that sub that did some inferior work, but it of course falls upon the main contractor to live up to that. We did our best to hold them to the fire, but there was things in there like concrete that was 8 feet thick, old foundation, so then we had to modify the contract, so we took it 5 feet below, and that was allowed by the DNR. And then the rubble that was there was, 90% of it was removed. And our understanding was what was removed was anything that had to be removed, shingling and whatever was removed. Anything that was buried was either concrete or wood.
You have
And
about 10 seconds.
I can't do it in 10 seconds, there's no way.
Give you.
So we actually modified the contract. We worked with an attorney, with Rumpf, and we modified it. We got some money back from the contractor and to compensate. And Rumpf said, this is the best we can do at the time. Our building inspector inspected it. He signed off on it. We know that it's not perfect, but it met the requirements at the time. So it was a bad situation for everybody, and we did the best we could with it. Hindsight's always 20/20. We could have, held the money, but then the contractor was going to walk. So what do you do? So it was tough. Now we'll do the best we can to clean up. My thought on it is that why do a complete cleanup of the site if whoever comes in might put slab on grade or parking lot? You don't need to dig all that out. It can remain buried. So we should have a plan of what buildings are going to go where, remove it where we need to, and leave it where we don't need to pull it out.
Okay.
Do you want my other minute? You can,
No.
okay. So Steve pretty much described what happened. Also, didn't that contractor go bankrupt then?
No, he didn't go
Oh, he
bankrupt, but,
went, the sub did or
oh,
something.
the sub
The
did.
sub did.
Yeah.
So we had two lawyers look at it and say we can't go after him for it. So what we'd have to do now is just move ahead.
The only reason I asked is when we built the grocery store out in 85 out there, we had to do so much stuff to dig and make sure everything was right. And we spent a lot of money doing it, and it had to be done. Now, I don't understand how that got done, and then we're coming back to this situation that,
I agree with you, Lon.
I mean, I know it's not you guys,
I know.
it's somebody, you know, it costs a lot of money, it's gonna cost us a lot of money.
Yes, it is.
Yes, we have to do it, no
Yep.
question. But something should be done about it as far as letting these people know that,
I just go back to, we did the best we could at the time.
And it was signed off by attorneys.
Let's go on and let someone else ask another question. We have about 5 more minutes for our audience questions.
Hi, I'm Jay Weiss. Could you walk through your thoughts behind your vote on whether or not we should require fiscal notes on capital projects over $25,000?
Let's give you each about a minute to answer that, and then we'll do the.
Could you
closing.
repeat the question, because I didn't get all of it? I'm sorry.
I'm interested in knowing what your thought is on how you voted on the fiscal note proposal. I believe it was back in July.
Yeah.
It passed, I believe it was fairly contentious though, maybe 4-3.
Yeah. I was for it. I was for fiscal notes over 25,000. Just, my platform is transparency, so that's where my vote was.
Dad?
I still don't understand the total, I don't know what the physical notes were.
Mark,
at the time.
The fiscal notes
Fiscal
about
notes.
doing financial reports that I think Mark made the proposal. And, you know, that every decision we make with
Okay,
a financial impact,
It was,
we have to
a
do.
lot of it is
The
PQ
staff has-
oriented.
Yep.
Yep.
The staff has to do.
Yeah, I believe I was for that also.
Okay.
And we should have approval by the board for things over 25,000.
Okay? My original vote was opposed because it wasn't, we didn't have the 25,000. It was for any financial impact originally. And my thought was it was generating way too much work for our staff. We already have our audit and finance committee that looks at anything of significant issues financially, and they make a recommendation to the board. So there really, this was, as I saw it, an unnecessary additional step that we'd have to make on financial issues. I was the one that said, can we put a limit? And I wanted it, you know, at least 12,000. We actually agreed on 25. I then voted for it. If it were down at, say, 5,000, I'd still vote against it.
Kathy?
And I was the same way as Steve. I originally voted no because it's an enormous amount of work for one person in the office to do on top of everything else that she does. The 25, this isn't really a transparency issue because everything we do is in public. All of our budget is in public. Anybody here can come to any meeting you want. We have our budget hearing meetings, nobody shows up. You can come to any audit and finance committee meeting if you're interested. Anybody can show up for anything. And to make it lower than 25,000, like I said, it's just an enormous amount of work for our one person in the office compared to everything else she does.
Okay, all right. So we have just a couple of additional minutes, and like I said, we have some time in between that I set aside if you'd like to individually talk with the candidates, great. I'm gonna give them each 1 minute to wrap it up and to summarize and to, you know, if they'd like to say anything else about why they're running or issues they see about.
Sure, I'll just wrap it up with, you know, in my service to in the military, we serve overseas so we can give people a voice. We serve our country, we promote democracy overseas so we can give people a voice, and that's what I would like to do for Cambridge.
Okay, Todd?
I'm running one last time. I'd like to be involved in finding solutions to the challenges facing the board. As I mentioned earlier, we must get moving on the Melster site cleanup and the treatment of wells 2 and 3. We need to pay for the county match on the bike trail and develop a funding plan for our emergency services. We need to be smart in our negotiations and contracts with developers and be diligent in project oversight. I'd like to see more transparency on the board, better use of the committee structure, more authority given to the village administrator, and more respectful communication between the board and staff, and between board members and between board members. Everyone needs to be heard.
The reason I'm stepping down as village president is because I feel like it's time for someone else to take the lead. I would have stepped down my last term, however, no one was willing to step in, and so I said I'll continue to serve. However, now we have 2 of our current candidates, or village board members, who are willing to step in as president. So I'm more than happy to step down and let them take the reins for a while. But then I'm running as a trustee to help support them and make the transition as smooth as possible, and also to serve on committees. I'd like to still be on water and sewer and the fire commission and whatever committees they would like to assign me to just continue to support the village.
And I'm running because I enjoy working for this village. In the past 10 years, I probably can't count more than 5 times that I would say we made the wrong decision. Unfortunately, I can't tell you about them because they were all in closed session. But I think we have a good village board. And I think our collective wisdom is doing a good job here. And I would like to continue that.
Good. Thank you very much. So we'll take about a 15-minute break, and then 7 o'clock we've got candidates for village president who will be. If there was anyone who wasn't here at the start of the first session, my name is Karen Seaman, and I'm the editor of the Cambridge News. And we just finished up a session with the village board candidates, and now we're going to have a half-an-hour session with the 2 village president candidates. And it will be a very similar format. I'll let them introduce themselves, and then we'll ask actually the same questions that we asked of the village board candidates. And then there will also be some time built in, like last time, to ask the village president candidates questions, your own questions. And then we'll open, so you're welcome to stay around as long as you want and ask them, just, talk with them yourselves beyond the forum here. Get going. Okay, so because these are candidates for village president, I allowed a little more time for them to introduce themselves and to say why they're running. The village board candidates, we gave them 1 minute, and we're going to give the village president candidates each 2 minutes to talk about who they are and why they're running. And just like in the first session, when you have 10 seconds remaining in your 2 minutes, I'll let you know so that we don't go over. So we're going to start the timer. And we'll be alternating as well. First question with Paula and the second question to Mark, so they each get a chance to be the first person to answer a question. So, go ahead.
I I've been on the village board for 5 years, and I was on the water and sewer board prior to that. As part of the village board, I am a member of the audit and finance committee, personnel committee, and I'm on the library board, which is one of my favorite places to be, in the library. So, I've been just personally, my husband Dean and I live between the two gas stations, so we've seen a lot of changes here in Cambridge, and we've enjoyed watching that over the last 23 years. I've been in the IT business for over 25 years, and have had progressively increasing responsibility roles. I currently work for Thrivent, and I am a senior manager for our digital communication services. Mark?
Okay. Good afternoon, or good evening, everybody. My name is Mark McNally, and I live here in Cambridge. 5 years, I've owned property in the community here for over 10. And I have been a member of the village board now, Board of Trustees for, it'll be coming on year number 4. I have lived here. I have 3 sons. My wife, Tammy, is a teacher for the Waunakee Public Schools, and I sell businesses. I'm a merger and acquisition advisor and a business broker, so I put together deals, and that's what I do for my full-time employment. I would like to think that there are a lot of interesting parts to Cambridge, and I've taken some time to get to know the various facets, and I think we'll be talking about that during the course of tonight's discussion, so I'll leave it at that.
Okay. All right. So as I said, the questions are identical to what we asked the village board candidates, and then you'll have time afterward to ask your own questions of them. So we'll repeat the questions as we did earlier. The Cambridge Fire and EMS Commission has made some important and costly recommendations this year regarding staffing and vehicle purchases, and more such decisions are ahead, including the proposed expansion of the fire and EMS station. The village is responsible for a significant portion of that cost. How should the village proceed with planning for and funding emergency services? And we'll start with Paula on that question.
So funding EMS and the fire department obviously is important. I think public safety is probably the most important thing that the village board can do, and where we need to spend our dollars. Making sure that our citizens are safe is very important. It is difficult with trying to balance the needs of the EMS and fire department with our limited funds. I know Kathy and Steve both had talked about having to go to a referendum. I would say that's probably the direction that we're going to have to go. I did read an article today from the League of Municipalities where we really need to take a look at the state levy limits and how we are getting financing. That's one of the things the League of Municipalities is going to be taking on this year. I think that would be very important for Cambridge to put our voice in, that being restricted with those levy limits does add extra challenges to balancing our budget. One of the things, though, that I do think is important is as we bring in new developments, we have to make sure that those developments, if we do have incentives, that those incentives will account for increases in our equalized value, which results in additional payments that we have to make for our portion of the payments for EMS and for fire. And so making sure that those are covered by either through the developer's agreement, I think would be very important.
Okay. Mark.
This is a really a loaded issue. In my opinion, as representatives, we have to provide 3 things. We have to provide police, fire, and EMT. All right, the EMT last year went from volunteers to 6 full-time, and that was done in about February. And that's a costly move, and we're hoping that they can keep this at 8. but they may very well increase it, and we'll have to deal with that. And that's just on the EMT side. And the fire department, volunteerism is it's a theory, but it's not working out anymore because a lot of people don't work here. They live here, but they don't work here, and so we don't have folks during the day. Now, besides the EMTs, we also have equipment, and we have a big purchase coming, and we were hoping that we could get some fundraising. That wasn't successful. We're going to see a new unit. Those units haven't been replaced since 2000, and we're going to have another one coming up here in 2 years, a small one. And then thirdly, we have the building. Now the building that we're talking about is the expansion of the current facility. That's why that pizza pit was bought. That kind of beats, you know, putting up an $8 million structure over on either side of town. But those three things are really coming at us, and they're going to be substantial. Now, if this isn't bad enough, last year there was $50,000 that was taken out of the EMT Fire Commission's budget that they have put into it for this year. They took it out of their capital account, they put it into their operating. They are not going to do that again this year. So our rates are going to go up here in the village. We are going to be looking at $50,000. So between all of this, it is a very difficult situation, but it's one that I promise you that I will look at because I think this is the primary responsibility of an elected official here in Cambridge.
Right. Development and infrastructure. In the past year, the village has been approached by developers wanting to build new neighborhoods and expand existing ones, and by a developer wanting to build a sizable gateway business and residential project with TIF assistance on U.S. Highway 12 and 18. Much of the former Melster Candy site near downtown remains undeveloped, and questions have arisen about cleanup there. The receipt of a Dane County grant to extend a bike path toward the Glacial Drumlin State Trail will require a large local match. And some significant public works projects lie ahead, notably the reconstruction of Blue Jay Way. What are the most important things the village needs to consider when planning for development and major public projects? And how would you prioritize and plan for funding? And we're going to start with Mark this time.
Okay, I do agree with Steve Struss, our current president.
You have to look at these not with preferential treatment on any one. You have to look at all of them together. Now one project takes and trumps the others. So the Pago site. I had asked the developer who came in, Mr. Todd Schultz. Now this is the property right behind the Donna Mertz property, right behind the Shell station. I asked him if they were looking at any kind of a TIF. He said at the time that I asked him, 99% sure he was not going to be doing that. He has since changed his mind because he's heard from the state of Wisconsin, the DOT, that there have to be two roundabouts, one at 1218 and further on to be able to get into that site. And the village of Cambridge is going to be the one who has to pay that. And that cost is going to be somewhere about $1,800,000. The Melster site, it's got to be cleaned up. I have walked that site. I have seen construction debris on the other side of the riprap, and it's between where the site is and the Koshkonong Creek. And I understand why the state of Wisconsin Department of Natural Resources is very upset. This has to be cleaned up. It should have been done properly years ago, but we will deal with it now. The bike path. The path, I am on that commission along with Mr. Struss. I believe that there are private individuals, companies, and I have been in contact with them, bicycle companies, I don't want to say who they are, but to try to get dollars from them that would not obligate the village of Cambridge. We cannot come up with $210,000 to match the county grant. We do have $210,000, but we have to be able to match that. And I believe we can do that with private fundraising and going to some of the responsible parties. Blue Jay Way, that's down by the high school. There is no possibility that annexation is going to occur. This is a town of Oakland, and if we get involved, we do that road. I've been told it's $830,000. If the town of Oakland does that road, it's $130,000. We don't own it. So my philosophy is town of Oakland, it's very important to us. Let's get it on your schedule for repair, but let them take care of their own road.
So I agree with Mark and Steve as well when we talk about weighing the upcoming projects and which ones are priorities. I think on one level, all of them need to be priorities. I think the first priorities, though, should come into those for existing areas or existing items. Blue Jay Way needing to be done. That would be important for fixing that road by the school, but I agree as well that we should probably just revert that back to Oakland. We have an agreement with Oakland, but at this point, we aren't getting any big benefit by maintaining those roads. I think the goodwill there is kind of over, and I think give it back to Blue Jay, give it back to Oakland, and they can take care of those costs themselves. The Glacial Drumlin Trail, Cambridge isn't responsible for the whole $209,000. Who's responsible is the committee that went together to ask for the funding. Cambridge is only the administrator of that funding. That is what Cambridge agreed to when that committee came to the Village of Cambridge and said, can you administer, because we have to have some entity, some government entity administer it. So my pushback will be against that committee and say, you have 5 years to come up with $209,000. Let's do our fundraising. Now I think it's important for Cambridge to contribute to that, but Cambridge has 5 years, and over those 5 years in our planning, let's take a look in our budget, what makes sense to be able to put against that in order to be able to contribute as well. But Cambridge is absolutely not responsible to come up with that $209,000 on our own. That responsibility is with that committee that was formed, which includes people from Dane County, Jefferson County. I believe the Township of Deerfield are included in that as well. So it's more than just Cambridge that's responsible for that trail. The Melster site, we've got to clean it up. No choice there, but that's what we have reserves for. So we do have some reserve funding. We can dip into those reserves in order to help to pay for that cleanup. No point in why it wasn't done right the first time. Let's just get it done again. That's why we have reserves. If we have to borrow, then we're going to have to borrow the money for that as well.
Question number 3. The downtown is the heart of a small historic community. In recent years, vacant storefronts have become an issue. At the same time, new businesses have sprung up and existing businesses have expanded and succeeded. And some local events, particularly Midwest Firefest, have drawn visitors downtown. How should the village approach efforts to keep downtown vibrant? And in a historically arts-driven community, how do the arts fit into all of that? And we'll begin with Paula.
So I have been very impressed with the activities that have been happening in the downtown area over the last, I would say, probably 2-3 years. The Firefest, 3 years now for the Firefest, that's a huge boon for the downtown business. And I love the fact that they are committed to keeping it downtown. And I think as a village, our role as a village board would be to make sure that we're encouraging people who want to do things downtown to come forward and do those things. When Dusty's daughter wanted to do the parade for Halloween, I thought that was absolutely wonderful, and the village supporting that was the right thing to do. The weekend after Firefest last year, Ken had a barbecue contest at the Keystone. So encouraging those types of things in our downtown businesses, I think is absolutely wonderful. I mean, with Dave giving us this space to be able to do things in the community and having that available, I think these are all things that are great and that we as a village board need to continue to encourage. The Try Cambridge Try. We're going to have to block off parking on Main Street, but it is a good thing for us to do because all of those things continue to bring bring people to the downtown businesses. The empty storefronts, from a board perspective, there's not a whole lot that we can do about those except to encourage those owners to try and either rent or sell. We have talked about or are considering potentially if there's any sort of legislation or ordinances that we can pass related to empty storefronts to encourage those to be filled in some sort of monetary way. So that's something that Steve had brought up at the previous meeting, that we're going to investigate and see if there's some way that we can incentivize. It might be a negative incentive for the people who continue to have empty storefronts, but we'll see if maybe that can incentivize them to get on board.
Okay, Mark.
I have volunteered to serve as a liaison with the Chamber of Commerce, and I have to tell you that the Chamber of Commerce, I think, is doing a wonderful job. I have seen a group of spirited folks really digging in and trying to get some things done here collectively. They're working now with the Board of Trustees, and in fact, Chris talked about this earlier. There's $10,000. Now, we're not paying it all at once. We pay it $2,500 per quarter, but they're going to come in and they're going to let us know what is taking place with the buildings, what is happening here with economic development, and then we'll be able to write them a check quarterly. So the Chamber of Commerce is an important tool. We probably cannot do this on our own with our own economic development coordinator that we used to have. And these are folks that are already here. They have a vested interest in seeing this community survive and flourish, and I think we should continue to try to support them. As far as owners, I disagree with my opponent here as far as penalizing property owners. I think you need to talk with them. I think you need to try to find out their schedule. In fact, I was just doing that again this past Saturday night. And I don't feel that you want to go in there and put a penalty against their property. I don't think that's the way to do this, but clearly we have to do something. We do have some vacant storefronts, and it is not pretty from the backside. So when we're over at Amundsen Center and there are buildings that have tarps on them, we do need to do something about that, because I think that's trying to collect the rainwater, and that's going to be a foundation issue eventually. So we do have to kind of work with that. Arts District, I like what we've done here. I think Lori Struss, and what you have done here with the Fire Fest and bringing this community to the forefront. I'd like to see this done in other areas. I like the Bark Fest. I like the parade that we have. We have a number of good, notable events that take place during the year, and I'd like to see those continue.
Do a similar format as earlier. If you have a question for the village president candidates, if you could please stand up and tell us your name and ask your question, and we'll give them each a chance to respond. Go ahead. Yes.
Hi, I'm Christiane Lang. While I currently don't live in the village, I do own a business, the Avid Gardener, downtown, and so my concern clearly is with downtown vibrancy, and I will be celebrating my 5th anniversary this year. It'll be my 6th season, and the year that I opened, thank you, I really felt a strong buzz and an uptick in Cambridge. There was a lot of good energy, and I sort of feel like we've seriously flatlined on that. And while some people swooped into town and have been here for about 4 years, I'm kind of not buying the we're going to talk to them thing. It's been 4 years of vacant buildings, and I am concerned for my future and my business, because you only get so many chances with people that come into town. And the number one thing I hear is we want more places to shop from customers that come into my store. Where else can we shop? We were already there. Where else? We were already there. Where else? They want to spend a good amount of time here shopping and eating and having that daytime. I'm not talking like 8 hours, but 3-4 hours where they can go to all the stores. And I'm not also asking for it to be like it was in the heyday of Grow. I think we need to reinvent that, but those are my concerns that I have.
So do you have, what would be maybe a specific question to ask?
Well, how can we address that? I realize we can't afford an economic development director, and I just wonder what ideas you have for sustaining that beyond trying to talk people into renting a business.
Let's start with Mark first.
Okay. Thanks for the question, Christiana. I have been in every business. I've been in your business, and I have been up and down Main Street. I have stopped in, and I haven't spent a lot of time. I think we have some really interesting success stories. I like your store. I like the dress shop. I like what's going on with the fan shop. And I have talked with these folks. Today, the thing about retail, and I know a little bit of this, but retail, in order for it to work, you have to have a physical site, but most people are doing it online. Now, your business might be mostly cash sales, but a lot of retail, that's what it is. It's a place where they're going to hold their merchandise, but they're not really selling it to the customers who come in. They sell it online. In fact, that's what happened when Kenseth moved out, because I talked to his sister. 90% of their sales were done online. That's why it didn't make sense for them to keep the building next door. But that doesn't mean that we do not have a task. We have to continue to work with you. We have to try to encourage you. And that's why I am so excited with the Chamber of Commerce and with Dave Middlestat and Dusty and some of the other folks that are there. I think they're really understanding this. And they are the best ones with the Village of Cambridge, the trustees, with some financial support to be able to help out.
So I think our biggest issue is the empty storefronts. I think the stores that are here are absolutely good, and I think they're moving us in the right direction and doing the right thing. So what we need to do is address those empty storefronts. And I've been on the board for 5 years, and they've been empty storefronts for 5 years. And we've had numerous conversations with the people who own those businesses. And we've had those conversations multiple times. And it's been numbers of people as part of the village who've done that. And at some point, if talking and encouraging doesn't work, then we have to look at another option, which is where I think why we need to start taking a look at if it's possible for us to have some sort of ordinances related to empty storefronts. And it isn't an easy decision to make. We don't want to be punitive about it, but I don't know of another way to incentivize the business owners to take advantage of opportunities that we bring to them. And when Linda was our economic development director, she actually brought to them numerous, here's somebody who wants a storefront, how can we make this work? And they would just not accept it. And the store owners didn't want to take advantage of those opportunities that were presented to them. So unfortunately, I think that that's what we're going to need to go with, that opposite direction, and see if we can get some movement that way.
Okay, thank you. Another question? Yes.
I'm just interested in how each of you...
Can you state your name, please?
Oh, Mary Jerma. How each of you would define the role of the village president, and also how the president's role relates to the rest of the board, how you distinguish, and how it relates to the village administrator. And then I also in terms of communications with developers and so on, like what is the role, is there a role for the president, and what are the boundaries of those roles?
Start with Paula.
So in my opinion, the village president, in my opinion, the village president is no different than anyone else on the board, except that they get to sign checks and they get to run meetings and facilitate those meetings. And part of running and facilitating the meetings is setting that agenda, making sure that we're covering off on the things that need to be covered off for the village. If I'm elected president, I am going to rely greatly on my administrator. I don't feel it's my place to meet as president to meet independently with different entities that might want to do something in the village. If we need representatives from the board to meet with a developer as well as our administrator, I don't know that the village president is always the right person to do that. So I would look to delegate or to ask for volunteers among other members of the village board. I don't feel like the president has any more power than anyone else on the board.
Mark.
We've had an unusual situation because we've had so many village administrators. If I'm not mistaken, I think we've had 6 and 7 years. And that makes it difficult. Our current president has had to pick up the ball a number of times and to keep initiatives moving ahead. I don't see myself doing that. I am with Paula. You set the agenda, you run the meeting, and you sign checks. You have no distinction. There's no, you know, you're over here and the trustees are here, and no, none of that. Everybody is on the equal basis, and I intend to run things that way. If I am elected, if I have your support. I go into the village hall every week. I have what I call my rounds, and some of you have seen me, and I go in there and I talk with folks, and I try to make sure that I understand what the issues are. But we have a good staff. Vicki in water and sewer, Barbara is just new to the team, and then we have Lisa. And I'm going to tell you, those are 3 people that are working very, very diligently for your interest. And that doesn't include everybody else that we've got out in the field, if you will. So I would like to see that continue on. I don't see any kind of a distinction between the trustees when it comes to the initiatives, as much as trying to make sure that we've got a full support for what we say is important, and we put the resources behind it, and then we carry it through. So that's what I would have to say about local governance.
So we are going to...
Can I ask a question?
Quickly, sure.
Quickly. So, I'm Bob Salo, County Board Supervisor. There's a need in this community for senior programs. I think we're all in agreement to that. What we don't have is some coordination of it. We have the nutrition, we have many different programs, and they're all doing wonderful things. We have an aging population. Can you tell me how your administration would foster or not some, I heard it mentioned before, a senior council or a senior subcommittee or a senior arm of the village government to help these programs flourish and coalesce their assets and their resources? Thank you.
Start with Mark.
Okay. Thank you for the question, Bob. I know that you are involved with this, and you and I have talked about it, and I would like to see this program continue with the seniors. I think our budget last year was $6,500. That's what we pay in, and that's a very important constituency. We need to take care of these folks. They look at the meals that you put on as not just food, but it's also entertainment. It's entertainment in the sense that they connect with other Cambridgeans. So I would like to see this continue on as a part of what we are already doing. It has to fit in, and I don't know what's going to happen with this year's budget, but rest assured, I understand how important that is, and you have my support.
Paula.
So I just want to give a shout out to Sue Christensen. I feel like Sue Christensen is the person on the village board who champions the elder needs. Every single time we have someone who comes in front of the board with the development or something else, who always asks the question, what about the seniors? What about senior housing? How can we add this to seniors? So I understand there are a number of different pieces around the community that address some of our senior needs. I think Bob hit it on the head when he said we probably need to bring those all together and to coordinate those. So I would work with staff, and I would also work with either the Cambridge Area Resource Team or the Cambridge Activities Program, so to see if we can do a combined effort to find some sort of volunteer group that can work together to help to coordinate and those activities, so we could maybe put them all under one umbrella. The $6,500 that we pay today is specifically for that meals program, which is administered out of McFarland, that I think has served the community very well, and we certainly don't want those dollars to go away. Now, that community meal is very important. But the question is, how can we bring things together to layer on top of that and to work with that? I don't have those answers, but I would want to talk to staff and as well as other of those resources we have in our community to see if we could find an answer.
We are running overtime.
This is important.
Go ahead. Go ahead.
Jay Weiss. This is a copy of the news from July 19th. And I'd just like a clarification from each of you, because I was told earlier that the vote on the fiscal note was for smaller amount, $5,000, where there was opposition, and that everybody voted for the $25,000 version. And if you could clarify that, because I'm going to just read very quickly a passage here. And Karen, you penned this piece. The 4-3 vote on July 10th means that a fiscal note is now needed before the board okays expenditures over $25,000. Voting yes were Ted Cumbier, Mark McNally, Sue Christensen, and Chris Brunig. Voting no were Paula Hollenbeck, Kathy Cunningham, and Village President Steve Struss, who just told me that that's not what they voted, no or against. So if I could have some clarification, perhaps one of the two of you could help me here.
Well, I can tell you how I voted and why. In both situations, I voted no. I'm really big on unnecessary ordinances, unnecessary recommendations, unnecessary resolutions. I believe that if we put something in place, that we have to make sure that we're abiding by it. So I had two objections to the resolution. One, we already do that for our staff. Our staff already tells us what the fiscal consequences are going to be for the items that come before the board. So I didn't feel like having a written resolution, which in the resolution it says we can waive it. So if you can waive the resolution, and our staff is already doing giving us the fiscal or dollar amounts that are affecting what's in front of the board, I just felt it was unnecessary, an unnecessary resolution. And so that's why I had voted no in both instances.
I can tell you what this came about from, and it had to deal with Water Street, PQ. And there are property owners, some larger property owners, that were going to get hit with a fairly heavy-duty expense because it was curb and gutter and we were replacing the road. And we decided at the board to give them 10 years to pay this off. But what we didn't do is we didn't factor in the interest. And we didn't know what that was going to be. We just decided to let them have it. And that's where it wasn't something that was already spent. It was more to deal with the collection on this. And I said, you know, we can't do this because we were reacting to approximately 25 people who had come in the previous meeting. And that's how it came about. They were concerned, and there were some heavy ratepayers because of the amount of lineage that they have on Water Street on PQ. And so we did this. And I felt that afterward we needed to take a step back when we start having these kind of programs, that we fully analyze the cost. So I am in favor of it, obviously. I made the motion, and now I'm giving you the background information as to why that happened.
Can you clarify what was stated earlier? Because we were told that the vote was actually against the 5,000 version, but they were all for the 25,000.
No, the first one had no limit, no dollar limit. So it meant anything that affected dollars. So if we bought a $200 lawnmower, that would have to have a fiscal note included with that $200 lawnmower. And that one, then what happened is the second one that came about put in, if it's over 25,000, then that would be the case.
And we were told that they voted for that.
I don't know how. I'm telling you how I voted, and that's all I can do, Jay, is tell you how I voted and why. But I do want to do a point of clarification. while Mark may feel like in that meeting he didn't understand what the costs were by allowing our residents to have a 10-year payoff period, I did. We knew what the interest rate was going to be on the bond that was out there. I sat down and I did the math while I was there in the meeting, and I felt like that we had already taken out the loan to include that interest cost, that the village was already paying it, and I felt that it was a reasonable, I thought it was a reasonable give back to the community members who were hit with a much larger assessment than what they thought they were going to get. And I just thought that was the fair thing to do.
Just, can I have just 30-second rebuttal? I would agree with that, Paula, but I don't think you can estimate, you can quantify the number of people who would not take advantage of the 10-year program. And that's why we needed to have our own staff look at this later on, because not everybody is going to finance it out over 10 years. That's pretty straight math, but there are going to be some people who pay their property taxes right away, and they don't want to have this hanging on for 10 years, because if they're going to sell the house in 3 years, they're going to try to lower the taxes. We didn't have any way of knowing what that amount was going to be. That's why we have to take it and go back and analyze this with all of that information, and it's a fiscal note.
So I did it based on worst case scenario.
Okay.
It would have been all of them taking it. And
Okay.
still felt that that was the right thing to do for the village.
Let's wrap it up. I'm going to let them, we're way over time, so what I would encourage you, if you want to stick around, the building is going to stay open and you can ask them questions, but I'd like to give them each just 1 minute to summarize and say, again, why they're running and why they would be the best candidate for village president. Paula.
So the reason I'm running for village president is I think Cambridge needs to have thoughtful, sensible, reasoned leadership. And I feel like I am the best person to offer that to the village. I've demonstrated in village meetings that I can take some of the complex items that come before the board and explain that so it's a little bit better to understand by the members of the board, so we can see what we are actually voting on. I think that that thoughtfulness and reasoned approach that I take to items and can definitely serve the village, and it's my way of giving back. I mean, I love living in Cambridge. I love the little house I live in, and I would appreciate continuing to be able to give back to the village.
Okay. Thank you. Like Paula, I love this town. I moved here about 5 years ago, and I see myself here in town. If you don't kick me out, I will be here when I retire, expire. Cambridge is made up of a lot of different groups, and in addition to the arts and crafts, we have people that work here that, you know, they don't have any they work here, but they live somewhere else. Or we have people who have children, or we have people that don't have children, and they're involved with the schools, and some might not be. There's a lot of pockets, and we need to be keeping all of these folks in mind when we're making decisions. We don't just look at one particular group and say, that's who Cambridge is about, and we're going to do everything for them, and not necessarily pay attention to all the other groups that make up this community. I welcome this challenge. I have gotten to know, I think, just about everybody in this room, and I would love to be able to work with the trustees and to be able to forge a Cambridge that not only pays homage to those who have come before us, but also presents this community with opportunities, take advantage of the school system, our graduates, as we grow forward. So I would appreciate your support here on April 2nd.